Today I'm going to be analyzing Metal Gear Solid 2 and how it relates to Nagel's The Absurd and Locke's of Identity and Diversity. So Metal Gear Solid 2 leads us in with the triumphant return of our protagonist Solid Snake. He is completing an infiltration mission on a vessel dubbed the Tanker. Snake is part of an anti-war duo called Philanthropy. He's joined remotely by his partner Otacon, and he's instructed to get photos of the new military-funded Metal Gear.
The mission objective is to make visual confirmation of the new Metal Gear being transported by that tanker and bring back photographic evidence. But I want you first to go up to the top level of the infrastructure, to the bridge. We need to find out where the tanker is headed.
A little reconnaissance, huh?
There's too much we don't know about this new prototype. If we know where the testing arena is, I can start to draw some reasonable conclusions.
All right, I'll head to the bridge ASAP.
The Metal Gear is a massive war machine that the player is always instructed to fight at the end of each game. The Metal Gear is stronger than any man or army. It's a device of mass destruction that remains a palpable threat throughout the series. As a main driving force for Metal Gear Solid's conflicts, getting these photos is very important. However, a run-in with Revolver Ocelot, a recurring series villain, forces Snake off the tanker and plummeting to his eventual death. Or so we thought. 2 years later, a man going by the name of Snake, somehow, floats his way up through a sediment pool. His mission briefing tells him to infiltrate the Big Shell, a decontamination facility off the coast of Manhattan. Due to Snake's reported death, the man is assigned a new codename and therefore a new identity.
What's wrong with Snake?
Just a precaution. You are now designated Raiden.
Raiden's reveal is one of the biggest plot twists in gaming history, at least 20 years ago when the game came out. The player anticipates another adventure with Solid Snake, who's even on the box art, only to see that character die right in front of them, and to see another guy taking his name and role. How dare he? Why should I care about Raiden? You might be asking. Because at first glance, Raiden is everything that Snake isn't. He's blonde, effeminate, whiny, and a little bit incompetent. This is his first real mission after hundreds of army-endorsed VR escapades desensitizing him, tragic backstory notwithstanding. He's dorky, his girlfriend is a nag, and he speaks so matter-of-factly as if he's done all of this before.
I was part of the Army's Force 21 trials.
Force 21. That's about tactical IT deployment, right? Any field experience?
No, not really. I've had extensive training, the kind that's indistinguishable from the real thing.
Like what?
Sneaking mission 60, weapons 80, advanced
VR, huh?
but realistic in every way.
A virtual grunt of the digital age, that's just great.
That's far more effective than live exercises. There's pain sensation in VR and even a sense of reality and urgency. The only difference is it isn't actually happening.
That's the way they want you to think, to remove you from the fear that goes with battle situations. War is a video game. What better way to raise the ultimate soldier?
Now, into the absurdity, into the actual meat of the project. The Metal Gear series is not one to stray from absurdity and abnormal situations. As a military stealth game, the series stands out from others in its genre mostly due to its usage of fantasy and horror elements to create a unique experience and story. In Nagel's On Absurdity, he refers to the topic as a discrepancy between aspirations and reality. Raiden aspires to succeed in his first ever mission outside of VR, but nothing seems to work in his favor and things keep getting weirder. His encounters with Fortune, an unkillable but suicidal woman, Vamp, who is an aptly named bisexual vampire, and corrupted artificial intelligence mocking him in his ear aren't your usual barriers you'd expect to encounter on an infiltration mission. And while things around Raiden are out of his control, he must assume the role of suspending his disbelief for a moment to immerse himself into his environment, whether it's real or not. And Nagel also describes the absurdity of life in the context of meaningless. Our lives are so short, so any actions we take will have no lasting effects on the universe around us. The universe is much too vast for us to have any impact, so we begin to wonder why we should even bother. Nagel states that when a person finds themselves in an absurd situation, they'll do their best to change the outcome by changing their perspective or otherwise removing themselves. When all else fails, put on an ironic smile and trudge on and keep going. Raiden does just that, with the mission always at the front of his mind. And when the game itself begins to look corrupted and glitched out, when the kernel tells us to turn off our consoles and cut the power, the mission still stays in our minds. One of the biggest discrepancies of all, despite how small it is in the grand scheme of the game, is the fact that Raiden realizes he has actually killed people.
Is it?
I'm a killer.
But
I see men hit, I see them die in agony, and I don't feel a thing for them.
don't think things like that, Jack.
I'm a born and bred killer. Nothing like Snake. He fights for something he believes in.
So do you. You're doing your duty.
No, I'm not. Somewhere deep inside, I'm enjoying this game.
In the conflict of absurdity, Nagel also mentions decision-making. So Raiden's decisions and lack thereof are both important to his and the audience's perception of reality and absurdity. His actions affect those around him just as much as his inactions. Near the end of the game, it is revealed that his body's biometrics are being transferred to an enemy group called the Patriots. The Patriots have captured Olga Gurlukovich's baby, and Raiden's biometrics are the deciding factor as to whether or not this infant lives or dies.
I deceived my troops, betrayed them.
But why?
My child is being held hostage by the Patriots. Putting it simply, my child's life depends on your success.
Despite not knowing the baby, and despite Olga double-crossing him, Raiden continues to live and to fight. His decisions, and lack thereof, are both important to his and the audience's perception of reality and absurdity. His actions affect those around him just as much as his inactions. And Nagel argues that you're making a choice regardless. Whether or not Raiden fights or runs away is a choice. Not making a choice is making the choice of inactivity, to put it simply. But Raiden seems to avoid this absurdity by sinking into depression and hopelessness throughout the game. If there's nothing he can do, he thinks to himself, why is he even bothering to try? Why is he here? Now let's get more into the theory of identity. Identity is a primary theme of the game for the character of Raiden, whose journey of self-discovery is guided by those around him. Having briefly been called Snake and going by the name Jack in his civilian life, he is quite familiar with the notion of having multiple identities. When the Colonel and Raiden's girlfriend are revealed to be artificial intelligence, they begin berating Raiden for his identity and lack thereof, claiming that it is nothing more than learned behavior.
I'll decide for myself what to believe and what to pass on.
But is that even your own idea?
Or something Snake told you.
That's the proof of your incompetence right there. You lack the qualifications to exercise free will.
That's not true. I have the right.
Does something like a self exist inside of you?
That which you call self serves as nothing more than a mask to cover your own being.
In this era of ready-made truths, self is just something used to preserve those positive emotions that you occasionally feel.
Another possibility is that self is a concept you conveniently borrowed under the logic that it would endow you with some sense of strength.
That's crap!
Is it? Would you prefer that someone else tell you? All right then, explain it to him.
Jack, you're simply the best, and you got there all by yourself.
Oh, what happened? Do you feel lost? Why not try a bit of soul searching?
Don't think you'll find anything, though.
Ironic that although self is something that you yourself fashioned, every time something goes wrong, you turn around and place the blame on something else.
Raiden's identity conflict, beginning with his imitation of Solid Snake, sets up the importance of this theme to the audience, who also aspires to be just like Snake. Snake also has some identity conflicts. Locke describes identity in the context of two things that cannot have two exact points of existence in the same place. This seems almost transitive in a way, as Snake is swapped for Raiden, and Pliskin becomes a more prominent identity for the hero we once knew until the veil is finally lifted.
Okay, can I ask you something?
What?
Are you the Snake? They said you were dead.
No, not me. There are still too many things I need to do.
Snake, you're a legend, and that's why I need to ask you this.
Legend? A legend is nothing but fiction. Someone tells it, someone else remembers. Everybody passes it on.
Despite undergoing many changes, Snake is still the same person from before, a reflecting and thinking person. As a character who was cloned as part of a super soldier experiment, identity also plays a major role in Snake's story throughout the series, but that is a lot of lore to get into, so let's hold that thought for now. Snake's struggle to separate himself from an identical man and twin who both aspired for war and conflict and decide what he stands for is a major series plot point. This is also mirrored in Raiden's desire to form his own identity at the end of the game and live for himself instead of having it forced upon by those around him.
I'll pick my own name and my own life. I'll find something worth passing on.
Now let's delve more into the idea of consciousness. Raiden's early life has been relatively unknown to him until the climax of the game. You remember how I said, tragic backstory withstanding? Here's the tragic backstory.
The 80s. A civil war. You were one of the best among the child soldiers that fought in that conflict. When you were barely 10 years old, you became the platoon leader of the small boy unit. At the time, your outstanding kill record earned you several nicknames, including White Devil and Jack the Ripper. Jack, I was your godfather. I named you. When the war ended, you disappeared from the relief center. I wondered what happened to you. I should have known they would recruit you.
Raiden was born in Liberia and kidnapped by Solidus Snake when he was 6 years old. From there, he became the leader of a child soldier army and was responsible for the killing of several Liberian rebels. Now, Locke argues that a situation in which a person doesn't remember their actions is one in which they cannot be held properly accountable. So, if Raiden's memory was jogged almost 2 decades after the event, could he properly be held accountable? And was he the same man, especially in the sense of the names used?
Codename Raiden, too, comes from the Japanese Navy's name for one of its interceptors.
Stop it. I'm not a weapon.
Oh, really? Do you know the code name the U.S. Armed Forces used for the Japanese fighter Raiden?
It was Jack.
So, having had his own identity, role, and personality forced upon him by others, Raiden is directionless in terms of who he is and is even dehumanized and compared to a weapon. According to Locke, a person is represented by the ability to use reason, to reflect, and to have consciousness. Consciousness is what makes for personal identity, but Raiden's issues seem to not be as philosophical as Locke makes them out to be. He is conscious in the literal sense of being awake and aware of his surroundings, but he's also the unwilling and seemingly unaware pawn until the end of the game. So in terms of consciousness, Locke also mentions a man cutting off his own hand, and I quote, "The limbs of his body are to everyone a part of himself. He sympathizes and is concerned for them. Cut off a hand and thereby separate it from that consciousness he had of its heat, cold, and other affections, and it is then no longer a part of that which is himself."
Time's over, friend. You're not cut out for war. Don't worry, I'll kill you quickly. What?
Thus, we see the substance whereof personal self consisted at one time may be varied at another without the change of personal identity. There being no question about the same person, though the limbs which but now were a part of it be cut off. And this isn't about Raiden, this is about Revolver Ocelot. I just had to bring this up real quick because I found it a very interesting application of this theory. MGS2 comes in and seems to address this by showing how a hand can transfer a level of consciousness and identity to someone else. Sort of like the body swap theory of Locke, but with a hand. So Revolver Ocelot loses a hand in the previous game. He immediately attaches the hand of the now deceased Liquid Snake. Originally his right-hand man, the man is now his right hand, and possesses him from time to time, complete with Liquid's signature British accent.
It's been a while, brother.
Who are you?
You know who I am.
Liquid?
Not so young anymore, eh, Snake?
If this seems like it comes out of left field, that's because it does. There are much weirder things that happen in this game. You just you get used to it. Locke states that this does not sever anything but the hand, but MGS2 seems to think otherwise. This is an interesting application of the identity theory. And, well, it's also extraordinarily absurd. Believe it or not, hands are not supposed to do that, and this even catches Ocelot and his men off guard despite their awareness of this strange occurrence. So to conclude the application of these two philosophical theories, MGS as a series is not one to stray from delving into references. Everything from pop culture of the era to obscure music and people to even sociological memes and theories are referenced throughout the series.
Free will is a myth. Religion is a joke. It's controlled by something evil. Memes. The DNA of the soul. How about full of shit? Is that a meme?
Now, it would be fair to say that the game's director, Hideo Kojima, took quite a bit of inspiration from reading philosophical theories and applying them to his characters and universe. It almost seems obvious at this point. And referring back to Absurdity, the differentiation between expectations and reality is a very common theme in many of his games, but especially in this one, due to its blurred lines of reality and virtual reality, a struggle that Raiden suffers with. And I could go on for hours just on the absurdity in this game by itself, so imagine what it would be like if I covered the entire series, a series that is known for weird things happening. And additionally, the conflict of identity and consciousness is one that comes up often. We get characters unsure of who they are or what their goals are, characters whose entire lives have been dictated for them, and characters whose goals are theirs alone. Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty is quite the experience for those curious about applications of philosophical theories as well as the rest of the series. And if all else, it's genuinely an entertaining and enthralling time seeing how these characters interact with their environment and seeing how human they all feel. So let's refer back to Raiden's reveal and the hatred that he garnered. There were a lot of angry gamers in 2001. Rightfully so, dare I say. Their expectations were dashed in the sense that playing as someone who wasn't Snake was absurd to them. Going into a game like this, they had these set ideas about the experience based on their previous gaming escapades. We'd already seen Snake in 3 games, so I guess it made sense to assume that he would be in another one. And this is the perfect application of absurdity in a real-life context. So if these people were to change their expectations and aspirations of the game, they could open the door for a new time and a new understanding of Raiden and the story. Walking away from the game, deciding not to play it, that closes that door. So sometimes facing absurdity is the right thing to do. Human life is absurd, in one way or another, but we can invite some of that in and experience it for ourselves if we're willing to try something new. The perception of this unusual occurrence is what made this game seem so relevant in terms of these concepts. The things we do every day are things we take for granted, video games included, of course. So to see something counter that, we might not react in a way that is logical. So some 20 years later, Raiden is seemingly a beloved character and protagonist in the Metal Gear world. He's gained some recognition as a character who is now, ironically, unrecognizable from his first appearance as an aloof, fully human soldier, yet he's still the same at his core, even if his new core is robotic and cold. Yeah, he got turned into a cyborg. Thank you so much for watching. I had a lot of fun doing this. I really love this game and especially the character of Raiden, so getting the opportunity to gush about it, especially for a grade, I had a lot of fun doing this. I hope you had a lot of fun watching. Thank you so much.
What's wrong?
Nothing. Can I ask you something? Who am I, really?
I wouldn't know. But we're going to find out together, aren't we?
Oh. Yeah.
See me for what I am, okay?